Hello, night wanderers. Thank you for coming again. I hope life is treating you kindly, my friend. I hope tonight you'll not only learn something new, but drift softly into dreams while the story unfolds. So, before we begin, put the screen away from your eyes. Let the room grow still. Close your eyes and listen not just with your ears, but with your heart tonight. I'm taking you on a journey through time, across mountains, deserts, and forgotten worlds to meet the great serpents of legend. This is the Dragon Atlas, a global history of dragon myths and legends. My story begins now, long before the first kings rose. Before iron sang or cities shone, the world belonged to silence, wind, and wonder. People looked up at the sky and saw fire streak across the night. They looked down into caves and found bones, vast, curved, ancient dot. And in the space between fear and awe, they dreamed of dragons. From the earliest whispers of humanity, dragons have haunted and blessed our imagination. They were the guardians of rivers, the keepers of mountains, the very breath of the storm. To some, they were divine, wise beings who carried rain and life. To others, they were monstrous creatures of fire and ruin, yet always they were powerful. Always they lived just beyond our reach, in the corners of maps, in the words of priests and poets, in the dreams that came with thunder. Perhaps they began with bones, ancient fossils half buried in sand, mistaken for the remains of scaled giants. Or perhaps they were born from something older still, the pulse of nature itself. The instinct that made early humans give shape to the forces they could not control. A river that could flood or nourish. A mountain that could erupt in flame. These were dragons, once. Tonight, we follow their trail. Across continents and centuries, we'll trace the dragon's many faces, from the river spirits of China to the gold-hoarding beasts of Europe. From feathered serpents in the jungles of Mesoamerica to dragons carved in stone beneath desert suns. This is their story and ours. For to dream of dragons is to dream of power, mystery, and the spark of imagination that never dies. So breathe deeply and let the first age unfold. We begin when the world was young, and the first serpents stirred in the dawn, when the first fires burned in the hearts of humankind, and language was still soft and new. People looked at the storms and the floods, and they gave them faces. They shaped stories from thunder and from the hiss of wind through reeds. And in those stories, again and again, one creature appeared, vast, coiling, ancient, a serpent that could both destroy and create. The dragon's first breath was the breath of the world itself. In the hot plains of Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates wound like twin serpents through the dust, people told of a goddess older than the gods. Her name was Tiamat, the salt sea, the mother of chaos. In the beginning, she was gentle, endless, deep. But when her children, the younger gods, rebelled against her order, she rose in fury. From her body came monsters, winged serpents, and scaled horrors. In the great battle of creation, the storm god Marduk faced her. He caught her winds in his nets, struck her with lightning, and split her body in two. From one half he made the heavens, and from the other the earth. The world, they said, was born from the body of a dragon. Long after that story was first whispered, the people of Mesopotamia still carved serpents on temple walls. To them, dragons were not only monsters, they were the source of all that existed. They were chaos, but also the beginning of order. And perhaps deep down, they knew every act of creation must rise from something wild, something untamed. Far to the south, in the land of the Nile, another serpent waited in the darkness beneath the world. His name was Apep, or Apophis, the great enemy of the sun. Every night, as the god Ra sailed his solar bark across the underworld, Apep rose to devour him. His coils wrapped around the sun, his jaws opened wide, and thunder shook the heavens. But every night, Ra's defenders struck him down. The sun would rise again, bleeding light across the desert, and the people rejoiced, knowing the dragon of darkness had failed once more in that endless battle, day conquering night, light pushing back shadow. The Egyptians saw a truth older than time. Dragons were not evil alone. They were necessary. Without Apep, there was no sunrise to celebrate, no triumph to hope for. The struggle itself gave meaning to the dawn across the ancient world. In lands separated by oceans and mountains, other serpents rose in the imagination of humankind. In the Indian subcontinent, beneath monsoon skies and sacred rivers, people told of Vritra, the dragon of drought. He was a serpent so vast he could coil around mountains and drink up all the waters of the world. For ages, the rivers ran dry and the earth cracked with thirst, until the god Indra came, armed with thunder. With his mighty weapon, the Vajra Indra struck Vritra down, and the dragon's body burst. From its wound, the waters returned, flooding the plains, giving life once more. The rains came, and the people rejoiced. Every year, when the clouds gathered and the rain fell heavy, they remembered Vritra's fall, and in their hearts they knew it was never truly a victory. The dragon would always return. For there can be no rain without drought, no life without death, no river without a serpent sleeping in its depths. Even in the earliest myths, dragons were not simply beasts. They were the shapes we gave to our fears and our hopes. To the farmers of the ancient world, a dragon was the storm that could ruin their crops, or the rain that could save them. To the priests, a dragon was a god's test, a symbol of the thin line between destruction and renewal. And as the stories traveled, so did the dragons. From Mesopotamia's clay tablets to Egypt's temple carvings, from India's hymns to Greece's poetry, the serpent slithered through every culture's dreams. In the rocky lands of Greece, they spoke of Python, a great serpent that guarded the oracle of Delphi. He was slain by Apollo, who claimed the oracle as his own. But the people still left offerings for Python, because they knew the spirit of the earth. The breath that spoke through the oracle's mouth still belonged to the dragon. And in the far north, where the cold seas roared and the nights were long, the Norse spoke of Jarmungandr, the Midgard serpent, born of chaos. It lay coiled around the entire world, biting its own tail. When it finally released its grip, the end would come, the twilight of the gods. Everywhere, the dragon was both the beginning and the end, the circle that closed itself. Perhaps that is why the image of the serpent devouring its own tail, the Ouroboros, appears in so many ancient symbols. It is the oldest of all emblems, life feeding on itself, creation and destruction bound together in eternal rhythm. And so, as human hands learned to shape fire, to forge tools, to build temples, the stories remained. Each time lightning flashed, or rivers flooded, or the ground shook, the people whispered of dragons. They were the answer to every mystery, the face of every fear. But listen closely, in the ancient songs, the dragon was not truly an enemy. It was the guardian of the sacred, the keeper of hidden power. It was the storm before the harvest, the shadow before the dawn, when the world was young. Dragons were the language of nature itself. They were the breath of the wind, the pulse of the sea, the spark of lightning, the tremor in the mountain's heart. To dream of them was to dream of the universe speaking in a tongue older than words. And in that dream, humankind found meaning, that even in chaos there is beauty. Even in the serpent's coil there is life. The dawns came and went. Civilizations rose and fell. But the dragons stayed, changing shape with every culture that loved and feared them. Soon, they would lift from the rivers and rise into the skies of the east, becoming symbols of wisdom and peace. But before that, in those first ages, they ruled the imagination of the world, serpents of storm and shadow, guardians of the threshold between creation and chaos. The first dragons did not breathe fire. They breathed the breath of the world itself. And when we remember them, when we close our eyes and see those great shapes curling through the mist of time, we are remembering the first dawn, when the earth and sky were young, and every storm carried the whisper of wings. There is a place where dragons do not roar in fire, but whisper in rain, where they do not guard gold, but rivers and clouds, where their scales shimmer like mist and silk, and their eyes reflect not anger, but wisdom. That place is the East. For thousands of years, across China, Korea, and Japan, dragons have not been beasts of terror, but symbols of harmony, beings born from wind and water, who guide the seasons and bless the earth. To understand them, we must first travel back, far back, to the earliest dynasties, when the world was smaller and the sky was vast beyond imagining. In ancient China, the people lived by the mercy of the rains. The rivers, the Yellow River, the Yangtze, were their lifeblood, their hope, and sometimes their destruction. When rains failed, famine came. When they raged too strong, floods swept villages away. To them, the rain itself seemed alive, and in their stories, they gave it a body, long, sinuous, scaled, and divine. Thus was born the lone, the Chinese dragon. He had no wings, yet he could fly. He breathed not fire, but cloud and mist. He lived in rivers, in storms, and in the hearts of mountains. He was not evil. He was not even an animal. He was a spirit, a force of balance, a messenger of heaven. Long before emperors ruled from golden thrones, the people prayed to the dragons of the rivers. They carved them into jade and painted them onto silk. They placed offerings by the water's edge, whispering for rain. And sometimes, they said, the dragon heard, when thunder rolled and rain fell gently on rice paddies. They would smile and say, the dragon has turned in his sleep. In time, the dragon became the emblem of divine authority itself. When the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, united China, he called himself the Son of Heaven and took the dragon as his symbol. His throne was the dragon throne. His robes were dragon robes. His face, carved in stone, bore the dragon's calm expression, proud, patient, eternal, to rule wisely, he believed. One must rule like a dragon, not through fear, but through harmony. Because a dragon does not conquer the sky, he moves with it. And so the dragon became not just a creature of myth, but a reflection of philosophy, the heart of Tao, the way of nature. The dragon flowed where resistance ended, as rivers do. He rose with clouds, fell with rain, and never broke the balance of the world. In the stories of old, there were 4 great dragon kings, each guarding one of the seas: the azure dragon of the east, the vermilion bird of the south, the white tiger of the west, and the black tortoise of the north. They shaped the order of heaven and earth. The azure dragon, the mightiest of all, ruled the spring, when life returned and rivers swelled. Even today, his image dances through festivals, his long body twisting through the air, his painted scales catching lantern light like stars caught in water. But these dragons were not only rulers of the elements, they were teachers, each one a lesson in humility and harmony. One old legend tells of a humble river dragon named Yinglong, the responding dragon. He served the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, a wise and mythic ruler said to have lived thousands of years ago. When war broke out among men, Yinglong descended from the clouds to help restore peace, carving rivers through the land so that armies could cross and crops could grow again. After his task was done, he shed his wings and slept beneath the earth, forever bound to the rivers he made, even in his rest. His spirit remained each time the rivers swelled after drought. People said Yinglong stirs. Far to the east, across the sea, Japan told its own stories. They spoke of Rirgen, the dragon king of the ocean, whose palace of coral and pearl lay deep beneath the waves. Rirgen ruled the tides with a magical jewel, the tide jewel. They called it, which could summon storms or calm the seas. He was not cruel, but he tested humankind, offering the jewel only to those who showed respect and patience. In one ancient tale, a fisherman named Huri lost his brother's fishing hook to the sea. Desperate, he dove into the depths, where Rirgen's daughter, the sea princess, guided him through the glowing halls of the Dragon King's palace. There, among drifting lights and silent fish, Hori found the hook, but more than that, he found understanding. Rirgen saw that his heart was humble, and so he gifted him the tide jewel, a symbol of balance between man and sea. To this day, the ocean's rhythm, its rising and falling tides, are said to follow Rirgen's eternal breath. Across Korea, dragons too were revered, though they carried a slightly different soul. They were called Yang, and unlike the dragons of China and Japan, they were believed to have once been imugi, lesser serpent spirits who longed to ascend. For 1,000 years, an imugi would live in rivers, climbing waterfalls, enduring floods, storms, and droughts. Only when it had proven its patience and purity would it rise to the heavens, shedding its old form, and become a true dragon. It was said that to see an imugi ascending was a blessing beyond measure, for it meant that even in the lowliest of creatures, divinity could bloom through perseverance. There is a quiet comfort in that story, because the imugi is not born a dragon. It becomes one through endurance, kindness, and faith, just as we, too, rise through struggle, through the endless climb of life. And so the Eastern dragon is not a monster, but a mirror reflecting our highest ideals in every culture. it teaches patience, humility, and harmony with nature. It does not hoard treasure. It gives rain. It does not destroy. It restores. It does not fight against heaven. It carries its message. Its long body weaving through cloud and river reminds us that power is not always violent. True strength can be soft, flowing, unseen, like water. And when spring arrives, when the first rains fall and the fields awaken, people still dance, the dragons dance. They carry long silk dragons through the streets, their movements rising and falling like waves, their heads swaying in rhythm with drums. The people below are many, yet together they form one being, one motion. One dragon, it is a living symbol of community and balance, of heaven's breath made visible on earth. Close your eyes and imagine it. The drums echo softly, the lanterns glow. The dragon flows like a ribbon of wind and light. You can almost hear the rain begin, as though the dragon is breathing life into the air itself. Across thousands of years, from dynasties to modern cities, the dragon remains. In paintings, in parades, in the imagination of children who watch the skies during summer storms, in every rolling cloud. There is the shadow of its long body. In every drop of rain, the whisper of its voice. And perhaps that's why, even now, when thunder rolls softly across the horizon, some people pause and smile, thinking not of fear, but of blessing. Thinking, perhaps, the dragon has turned in its sleep once more. For in the East, dragons never died. They simply became the rain that nourishes, the river that heals, and the wind that hums lullabies to the dreaming earth. In the lands of the setting sun, where mountains cut the horizon like the teeth of sleeping giants and forests whispered in ancient tongues, the dragon was born again. But this time, it did not rise with rain or flow with rivers. It crouched among stones and shadows, breathing heat into the dark. Here in the West, dragons were creatures of fire. They did not bring the clouds, they consumed them. Their eyes gleamed with the reflection of gold and flame. And when they moved, whole kingdoms trembled. In the old world of Greece, poets spoke of serpents older than gods. There was Laden, the sleepless guardian of the garden of the Hesperides, 100-headed dragon coiled around a tree heavy with golden apples. Those apples were the fruit of immortality, gifts of the earth's deep heart. No man or god could take them while Laden watched. Even Heracles, mightiest of heroes, had to trick the guardian to claim them. And when he did, it was not without sorrow, for every dragon slain left the world a little emptier, a little less magical dot to the Greeks. Dragons were not mindless beasts. They were sentinels of sacred places, reminders that power and wisdom must be earned, not stolen. In their tongue, the word draken came from a root that meant to see clearly. A dragon, therefore, was the one who sees the vigilant, the knowing, and yet, over centuries, the meaning began to twist. For every hero who sought to prove his worth, there had to be a monster to slay. And the dragon, immense, ancient, mysterious, became that monster. As time passed, the dragon changed shape. It grew wings. It breathed fire. And in the mountains of Europe, it began to hoard, no longer the guardian of sacred fruit or divine waters. It became the keeper of gold, the symbol of greed itself. In the sagas of the North, the dragon's scales hardened with human sin. The Norse told of Fafnir, a dwarf once consumed by envy. He killed his own father for a cursed treasure, and the curse consumed him in turn, twisting his body into that of a dragon. He hid in the mountains, sleeping atop his stolen hoard, his heart blackened by desire. No hunger, no thirst, only the endless need to keep what was his. Years passed, until a young hero, Sigurd, came seeking glory. He dug a pit along the dragon's path, waited, and when Fafnir crawled forth, he struck upward with his sword. The blade pierced the dragon's heart, and from its wound poured blood like molten metal. Sigurd tasted it, and in that taste he heard the speech of birds, the whispers of fate. But the gift carried sorrow, for through that blood he learned betrayal awaited him. In the north, dragons were symbols of wisdom, yes, but wisdom that burned. Knowledge that costs more than gold. And as those stories spread through the sagas, through the songs of bards, the dragon grew even darker. By the Middle Ages, it had become the embodiment of evil. When monks painted their manuscripts, they drew dragons curled at the edges of maps, marking the boundaries of the known world with the warning, "Here be dragons." Those words were not merely cartography. They were a confession that beyond the reach of reason, beyond the light of faith, something vast and untamed still waited. It was the wildness of nature, the chaos of human fear, the unknown itself. In the tales of Christendom, dragons came to represent sin and darkness. The story of St. George and the dragon became one of Europe's most beloved legends. It was said that a terrible dragon terrorized a kingdom, demanding sacrifices, even maidens, to appease its hunger. One day, when the princess herself was chosen, a knight named George rode out to face the beast. He carried no greed, no pride, only faith. And when he raised his spear and struck, the dragon fell. In that moment, the symbol was complete. The dragon was chaos, the old gods, the untamed forces of nature. The knight was order, light, and human will made divine. Every time the tale was told, it was not only a story of courage, it was a ritual of civilization conquering the wilderness, spirit overcoming instinct. But beneath the sermons and shining armor, something else endured, a quiet fascination. Because even as the church cast dragons as demons, people still carved them into cathedral walls. They still hid them in corners of tapestries, in stories told by candlelight. They still dreamed of them. The dragon refused to die. It survived through art, through imagination, through the old songs of wandering minstrels, who still whispered of sleeping giants beneath the hills. One story told of the wyvern, a two-legged dragon that stalked the forests of England and France. Smaller than the great serpents of legend, yet cunning and fierce. To some, it was a devil, to others, a guardian spirit of lost ruins and barrows. Another tale spoke of Melusine, the serpent woman, cursed to become a dragon every Saturday. She was not evil, but misunderstood. A reminder that the monstrous and the divine are often the same seen from different eyes. And so, while kings and priests taught men to fear dragons, the poets kept them alive. They saw in those scaled forms a reflection of the soul, our hunger, our loneliness, our secret wish to fly. Because what is a dragon, if not the embodiment of everything we long for and fear within ourselves? We want its freedom, its strength, its knowledge, but we dread the cost of becoming it. As the centuries passed, dragons retreated further into story. The forests grew quiet, the mountains less mysterious. But still, the people believed that somewhere, deep beneath the earth, dragons slept atop their treasures, dreaming of the age when men still feared the dark. And perhaps they do. Perhaps the rolling thunder we hear in spring is not the sound of storms, but a dragon turning in its sleep, when medieval alchemists searched for the secret of transformation. For the philosopher's stone, they used the dragon as their symbol. They called it the dragon Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. To them, the dragon was both poison and cure, destruction and creation. It was the fire that could burn you, or forge you anew. That idea lingered, that somewhere in the heart of darkness lies wisdom, waiting to be understood. And though knights slew dragons in story after story, some part of the human spirit mourned them, for in killing the dragon, we lost something wild, something ancient, the reminder that not all that is dangerous must be destroyed. Listen now, and imagine the western dragon sleeping still, its wings folded beneath stone, its breath slow and deep, warming the caverns beneath forgotten hills. Around it lies gold, not for greed, but as memory, a record of all the ages it has seen, all the kings who have risen and fallen like sparks before its gaze when it wakes. Its eyes open not with malice, but with sorrow, because it knows the world above has forgotten what it once meant to dream of dragons. The Western dragon story is not only one of fire and fury, it is the story of the human heart, proud, fearful, longing. It is the part of us that gathers, that guards, that yearns to keep what we love from slipping away. And so we build walls, we hoard our memories, our treasures, our comforts, until, one day, we realize we have become the dragon ourselves. Yet in that realization lies redemption. For every dragon slain in legend is also a dragon understood, and understanding is what transforms fear into wonder. The Western dragon still lives in our tales, in the curled edges of ancient maps, in the fires of old songs, in the pages of poets and dreamers who, even now, still whisper to the dark dot it waits in the silence between thunder and dawn. In that breathless moment, when you open your eyes to the unknown and feel both fear and fascination intertwined, that is the dragon's gift, to remind us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, to look upon the fire, and see not destruction, but light. And so, the Western dragons awaken not to burn the world, but to remind it of its heartbeat, the heartbeat of curiosity, of wonder, of the eternal dance between chaos and order. If you listen closely now, in the soft crackle of the hearth, in the hush between raindrops, you might hear it still, the slow exhale of a dragon sleeping beneath the world, guarding not gold, but the memory of what we once were when our stories still burned bright enough to light the dark dot far across the wide oceans, where the air grows heavy with the scent of rain and flowers. Another world dreamed its own dragons. Here, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, beneath the shadow of stone pyramids and the golden haze of endless sun, people looked not to the fire, nor to the clouds, but to the air itself, and to the serpent that learned to fly. They called him Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. To the Maya, he was Kukulkan. To the Toltecs and Aztecs, he was God, priest, and teacher, a being of wind and wisdom, both serpent and bird, both earth and sky. And just like that, the oldest symbol of fear, the serpent, became, once more, the bringer of light in these lands. The dragon did not roar. He sang through the wind that swept the high plateaus, through the rustling of the trees, and through the soft hiss of rain over ancient temples. The feathered serpent was not a beast to be slain or appeased. He was a god of knowledge and renewal, a reminder that life was an endless spiral, a rhythm of endings and beginnings. His feathers shone like emeralds, his scales glimmered like jade. He was the bridge between worlds, the sky above and the soil below, the spirit and the flesh, the divine and the mortal. To understand the feathered serpent, we must first step into the sacred world of the Maya. They built their cities with such precision that the columns themselves seemed to rest upon them. And among those cities stood Chichen Itza, its great pyramid rising like a stairway for the gods. On the day of the equinox, the sun casts its light just so, and along the edge of the pyramid's stairs, a shadow slithers downward, forming the body of a serpent that joins the carved dragon head at its base. It is Kukulkan, descending from the heavens, the god returning to bless the earth with balance and rain. To watch this happen, even today, is to see time itself breathing. The ancients stood there, heads bowed, feeling the warmth of the sun and the cool of the shadow as one. They whispered prayers for the harvest, for the turning of seasons, for the endless rhythm of creation and return. Because that is what the feathered serpent truly represented: balance, the union of opposites, light and dark, male and female, heaven and earth. From understanding that opposites are not enemies, but reflections. In the Aztec world, Quetzalcoatl was a creator and a savior. They said he shaped humankind from the bones of those who came before, mixing them with his own blood so that life could begin anew. He taught people to measure the stars, to count the days, to write with symbols, and to live with purpose. He forbade human sacrifice, teaching instead the value of offering one's heart through art, through music, through thought. He was called the Lord of the Morning Star, for he was the light that rises after darkness, a promise that even after the longest night, dawn will return. But not all gods love balance, and not all stories end in peace. The Aztecs told how Quetzalcoatl's rival, Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and mirrors, envied his purity. He tricked Quetzalcoatl, showing him a reflection of his face in an obsidian mirror, a face lined, weary, human. And seeing his own frailty, Quetzalcoatl wept. He wandered from his temples and disappeared toward the east, his body becoming a serpent of light rising into the sky. They said he would return one day when the world was ready for peace again. And so he became both presence and absence, a god of wisdom who leaves, a hope that sleeps but never dies. There is a sadness in that story, but also a kind of grace, because the departure of the feathered serpent is not a fall from power. It is a reminder that wisdom, once given, remains, that the breath of the dragon never truly leaves the world it taught to dream. To the Maya and the Aztec, Quetzalcoatl was not alone. The jungles and deserts of the Americas were filled with serpent gods, each whispering the same truth in different tongues. In South America, among the peoples of the Andes, there was Amaru, the double-headed dragon, half bird, half serpent, who moved through water and sky alike, a messenger between worlds. In the Amazon, stories spoke of giant river serpents, their eyes like lanterns, their movements stirring whirlpools that opened gateways to the spirit world. And in the north, among the Hopi and Pueblo peoples, the horned serpent of Anu guarded the waters, bringing both drought and rain. Its lightning tongue split the sky, its coiled body marked the rivers that carved the land. In every one of these tales, the dragon or serpent was never a creature of malice. It was the pulse of life, the rhythm of the earth itself, a being too vast to fit inside the small boundaries of good and evil to the peoples of the Americas. Dragons were gods that breathed not fire, but breath itself, the wind, the spirit, the life force that moves through all things. Imagine, for a moment, standing in those ancient cities. The sun is setting behind pyramids of stone. The air is thick with the scent of incense, and drums beat softly in the distance, echoing the heart of the world. Feathers glimmer in the twilight, and the people look up, waiting for the moment when light and shadow meet on the stone steps, and the feathered serpent descends once more. You can almost see it, the shimmering body made of sunlight and dust, the eyes reflecting both heaven and earth, the wings that are not wings, but air itself in motion. It does not roar, it simply breathes, and with that breath, the wind stirs, the fields whisper, and time folds like a wave returning to the sea. In the west, dragons guarded gold. In the east, they guarded rain. But here, across the ocean, they guarded the soul, the spirit that moves unseen through the living world. And though the civilizations that built those temples are gone, their stories remain carved in stone and memory. Every year, at the equinox, when the shadow of Kukulkan slides down the pyramid once again, people gather to watch. They come from every corner of the world, pilgrims, dreamers, wanderers, and as the serpent's shadow touches the earth, there is silence. For a brief moment, it feels as though the ancient god still lingers, still breathing, still waiting. The feathered serpent teaches us that the divine is not above us or beneath us, but within us. That wisdom is not in conquest, but in understanding. That the sky and the earth are one, just as breath and heartbeat are one. He is the dragon that rose not from chaos, but from compassion. The dragon who showed humankind that we do not have to fight nature to be strong. We can rise with it. And perhaps, in some quiet way, he still drifts among the clouds, his feathers scattered across the winds, his spirit living in every breeze that touches the earth. For when the wind moves gently through the leaves, when the air feels alive and golden just before dawn, you might feel it, the light breath of a serpent who once carried the sun. That is the whisper of Quetzalcoatl. That is the dream of Kukulkan, the dragon who learned to fly, and in doing so, taught the world to rise. When night falls over the endless deserts, and the stars bloom like silver flowers in the dark, another kind of dragon begins to stir, one born not from water or wind, but from silence and sand. Here, in the cradle of the ancient world, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Arabia, dragons were older than memory. They were carved into the first myths, written in the first words, sung in the first prayers, whispered to the heavens. Beneath these skies, where the air trembles with heat by day and cools like glass by night, the serpent was the first storyteller. Its movement across the earth traced the path of rivers. Its coils mirrored the curves of constellations. It was both below and above, death and rebirth, chaos and order, the eternal circle of existence itself. Long before the myths of Europe or the Far East took shape, the people of Mesopotamia told of Tiamat, the dragon mother of all creation. Tiamat was not a beast to be feared, but the ocean made conscious, the saltwater abyss, vast and unending. Before the world was formed, she swam through the dark, her breath giving rise to gods and stars alike. But as her children multiplied, they rebelled, seeking to shape the chaos she embodied. The god Marduk rose against her, and in a battle that echoed through the ages, he split Tiamat's vast body in two. From one half, he formed the heavens, and from the other, the earth. Her eyes became the sources of the great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, and her blood, they said, still ran through the veins of humankind. From Tiamat's fall, creation was born, and thus, from the very beginning of time, dragons were not simply monsters, they were the first mothers, the primal womb of the universe. Even in her defeat, Tiamat's presence endured. Every storm, every wave, every desert wind still carried her breath. And in the dreams of kings and priests, she whispered of the power that flows through both chaos and order. For without her, there would be no world to rule, no life to worship the gods. In that ancient truth lies something profound. The dragon was never only destruction, it was the price and promise of creation. Farther west, where the Nile carved a ribbon of life through the sand, the people of Kemet, ancient Egypt, told their own stories of serpents and stars. To them, the serpent was eternal. It coiled around the sun, guarded the passage of night, and swallowed the boundaries between life and death. They spoke of Apep, the great serpent of darkness. Every night, as the sun god Ra sailed his golden bark through the underworld, Apep rose from the depths to devour the light. Thunder was his voice, earthquakes his stirring coils. He was chaos incarnate, the endless struggle against order. Yet every dawn, Ra emerged victorious, his light spilling once more over the horizon. The message was simple, yet eternal, that even darkness has its purpose, for without it, light would have no meaning. The priests of Ra would perform rituals through the long hours of night, chanting and burning incense to aid their god in his celestial battle. When dawn finally broke, the people rejoiced, not because the serpent was gone, but because balance had been restored again. For even in Egypt, the serpent was not simply evil, it was necessary. It was the shadow that gave the sun its glory. And in the tombs of pharaohs, artists painted another serpent, Menon, the coiling guardian who wrapped himself around Ra to protect him on his nightly journey. So, even as one serpent sought to devour, another sought to defend. Both were part of the same eternal circle: creation, protection, destruction, and renewal. And so it was that the Egyptians came to see the serpent as a symbol of immortality. It shed its skin and was reborn, a miracle of renewal in a land where death was never truly the end. The uraeus, the upright cobra, was worn upon the crowns of pharaohs. It was not a mark of terror, but of divine authority, a living flame upon the brow, a reminder that the ruler's power came from both the sun and the serpent. In that sacred symbol, the dragon was no longer a monster to be slain or appeased, but a companion of kings and gods from Egypt. The serpent's shadow stretched eastward across the sands, carried on the caravan winds to the ancient Arabian Peninsula. There, beneath the same constellations, nomads and poets spoke of serpents that moved through the dunes like ghosts, vast and luminous, their scales reflecting the starlight. They were said to guard the hidden wells, to coil around lost treasures buried beneath the sands. And in the lore of the desert, there were whispers of jinn, spirits of smokeless fire, who could take the form of dragons when angered or awed. To see such a serpent gliding through the twilight dunes was not to encounter evil, but mystery, a reminder that the desert holds more than mere emptiness. It holds memory. It holds magic. Arab poets spoke of the dragon as a creature of the in-between, neither mortal nor divine, neither seen nor unseen. It lived in the mirage, in the shimmer of heat, in the moment between waking and dream. It was said that when a traveler grew lost and the desert wind began to sing, a dragon might appear in the distance, its form woven from dust and starlight, guiding the lost toward an oasis, or perhaps toward something even deeper. To follow it was an act of faith, because the dragon of the desert was not a guide of the body, but of the spirit. It led one not to water, but to understanding. And in those rare nights when meteors streaked across the black velvet sky, the Bedouin whispered that they were the dragons of heaven, serpents of flame cast from the stars. Their fiery trails were said to burn away the lies of men, leaving only truth in their wake. Even now, if you stand in the silence of the dunes and look upward, you might see it, the curve of a constellation called Draco, the celestial dragon forever coiled around the north. Its stars have watched over humanity since we first looked up, and perhaps it watches still, its slow, eternal movement, a reminder that even in the cold vastness of space, the old stories continue to burn in all these lands of sand and stone. The dragon took 1,000 forms: Tiamat, the mother; Apep, the devourer; Men, the protector; and the dragons of the desert winds who shimmered between worlds. But in every form, one truth endured. The dragon was the breath between worlds, the silence before the dawn, the motion beneath stillness, the hidden heartbeat of the cosmos. It is fitting, perhaps, that in these oldest of civilizations, the dragon was never only a creature of fear. It was the living symbol of time, of the endless cycles that bind us all. And if you listen closely, the desert still whispers their names. The wind sighs through the dunes like a serpent's breath. The stars above twist in slow, coiling arcs. And beneath it all, the memory of those ancient dragons still stirs, vast, eternal, unending. For even when empires crumble and their temples sink beneath the sands, the dragon remains, watching from the shadows between the stars, guarding the eternal dream of humankind to find meaning in the mystery of creation itself, beyond the deserts. Where dawn rises in slow gold, where rivers shine like silk ribbons through the valleys, the dragon takes a gentler breath. Its fire is not flame, but spirit. Its wings not of bone, but of cloud and wind. Here, in the lands of the Far East, dragons are not hunted or feared. They are honored. They are the breath of heaven itself. The oldest stories say that when the world was young, dragons ruled the elements, earth, water, wind, and sky, and among them, the most revered were the lung of China, creatures of wisdom, justice, and balance. They were not monsters, they were guardians. Their presence meant harmony, and their absence, chaos, in China. Dragons were born not from volcanoes or the sea, but from the imagination of a people who saw beauty in nature's power. The dragon's horns came from the stag, its head from the camel, its eyes from the demon, its belly from the clam, its scales from the carp, and its claws from the eagle. It was not one beast, but all beasts, a symbol of unity, of the interconnectedness of all things. And when the rains came to nourish the fields, it was said that dragons danced among the clouds. Their voices were thunder, their laughter the rush of wind before the storm. The ancient poets wrote, "When dragons fly, the heavens move." To the people of China, the dragon was the soul of prosperity, a creature that rose with the mists, who brought the rains that fed the rice and the rivers that gave life to empires. In the Book of Rites, the dragon is described as the noblest of creatures, the emblem of the emperor himself. The Son of Heaven wore the dragon upon his robes, not to rule by fear, but to remind the world that his power, like the dragon's, must flow with nature, never against it. The imperial dragon had 5 claws, a sign that it stood closest to heaven. 4-clawed dragons served princes and nobles. Even the embroidery upon their garments was regulated, for to wear a 5-clawed dragon without divine right was to claim the voice of thunder without the blessing of the sky. The dragon became a language of its own, a symbol of rain, of fortune, of renewal. Its image curled along the eaves of palaces, wound around temple bells, and gleamed upon the handles of swords, not meant for war, but ceremony. And yet, beneath all this reverence, there was an older, quieter truth, that dragons, too, could sleep. Legends tell of the 4 dragon kings, who ruled the seas of the north, south, east, and west. Each commanded not armies, but tides. Each held dominion over the rain and the storm. Once, when the earth grew dry and the rivers turned to dust, the people cried to the Jade Emperor for relief. But he did not answer. Moved by pity, the dragons rose from their watery palaces. They gathered the clouds and poured rain upon the fields, saving the mortals from death. When the emperor learned of their defiance, he grew wrathful and ordered them imprisoned beneath 4 great mountains. But even in chains, the dragons did not despair. Their bodies became rivers, the Yangtze, the Yellow, the Black, and the Pearl. And through those rivers, they continued to nourish the land. Their punishment became their gift. Their stillness became motion. And so the people honored them, not as rebels, but as saviors. Every drop of water that flows through China's rivers is said to carry the breath of those sleeping dragons, still the promise that compassion endures even against the will of heaven. As centuries passed, the dragon's image spread to Korea, where it became a protector of peace, and to Japan, where it took on the grace of water itself. In Japan, the dragon was known as Ryer, and it lived not in the skies, but beneath the waves. Its scales shimmered like moonlight on water, its movements quiet, deliberate, patient. The Japanese dragon did not roar or burn. It listened. It waited. Its wisdom was not spoken, but felt like the calm beneath the storm, like the stillness at the center of the ocean. Temples were built beside springs, said to be blessed by dragons. Fishermen prayed to them before setting sail, and monks carved their likeness upon the pillars of their sanctuaries. Believing that the dragon's breath guarded the sacred flame, there was one tale of the monk Kabi Daishi, who meditated beside a mountain lake so still it reflected the sky. As he sat, a great dragon rose from the depths, not to frighten him, but to listen. The monk did not move. The dragon bowed, and the surface of the lake rippled as though the world itself had sighed in that meeting. Between silence and wisdom, the two became one. And so, in the East, the dragon is not a creature of conquest. It is the embodiment of harmony. It is water in motion, wisdom in patience, power in restraint. But as we drift northward, to the frozen lands where winter reigns and auroras dance like spirits, the dragon takes yet another shape. In the myths of the Siberian tundra, of the Arctic's endless white, the dragon becomes the frost serpent, a creature carved from ice and wind. Its body stretches across horizons, its breath forming clouds that drift for days. Some say the auroras themselves are the light of these northern dragons, their scales glowing with celestial fire as they move through the upper air. Others tell of Zilland, the serpent of the Volga, a dragon that once guarded the city of Kazan. Half myth, half memory, the people there still speak of it, not as a monster, but as a spirit of the land, the guardian of waters and wind. To the Norse, the dragon was darker still, Ni Hggr, the serpent who gnawed at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. It dwelled in the cold shadow beneath existence, feeding upon decay, waiting for the day the tree would fall. And yet, even in that image of death, there was balance. For as the dragon devoured the roots, new life grew above. In destruction, there was renewal. The northern dragons remind us that life and death are not opposites, but partners in the same eternal dance. When storms howl across the tundra, when lightning crawls across a frozen sky, you can almost hear it, the deep, distant rumble of a dragon's breath moving through the clouds. The east and north teach us that dragons are not bound by shape or sound. They are not always creatures of terror, nor always of peace. They are what the world needs them to be: teachers, guardians, mirrors of our own spirit. And perhaps, if you listen closely tonight, you might feel them, the sleeping dragons beneath the oceans and mountains, their dreams shaping the world even now. They do not sleep in stillness. They sleep in rhythm, the rhythm of waves, of wind, of the turning earth. Every storm, every dawn, every tide is their heartbeat. And we, the small and curious beings who dream beneath their gaze, are part of that heartbeat too. For the dragon, above all things, is not a creature apart from us. It is the memory of the earth dreaming through us, its wonder, its fury, its eternal longing to rise. By the time the Middle Ages draped the world in stone and silence, when monasteries glowed with candlelight and the scent of ink filled the air, the dragon had become something more than a creature. It was an idea, a shadow that lived not in caves or clouds, but in the pages of books and the hearts of dreamers. Across the castles and cloisters of medieval Europe, the dragon's wings darkened the margins of manuscripts. It twined itself through the letters of illuminated texts, its body curling around prayers and psalms. Sometimes it guarded them, sometimes it threatened to devour them, but always it was there, a silent reminder that mystery could never be erased, only redrawn in finer lines. Monks bent over parchment, quills whispering across vellum, drew dragons at the edges of holy words, as though admitting that even the sacred had its shadows in their art. The dragon was sin and salvation, both a beast of temptation and the guardian of divine knowledge. For in this age, the dragon had become the symbol of what humanity most feared and desired: power. The medieval dragon was no longer the elemental spirit of nature, nor the celestial guardian of rain. It was the hoarder, the keeper of forbidden things: gold, wisdom, truth. It slept upon treasures of both earth and spirit, and to reach them, a hero had to face not only the beast, but himself. And so were born the dragon-slaying legends that shaped 1,000 tales. We hear them in the story of St. George, the Knight of Light, who rode to free a kingdom from the tyranny of a serpent. The dragon, they said, emerged from a dark lake, its breath like pestilence, its wings blotting out the sun. The people had offered it sacrifices to survive, until George came, not for reward, but for righteousness. When he struck the dragon down, he did more than save a princess. He performed a ritual of the age, the triumph of faith over fear, of order over chaos, of the soul over the untamed wild dot. The story spread like wildfire through Europe, from parchment to stained glass, from altar to hearth, and with every telling, the dragon sank deeper into shadow. It became the symbol of the devil, the enemy of God and man, and yet people still loved it, because even as they feared its fire, they longed for its freedom in the dark corners of taverns and under the eaves of cold halls. Bards sang other songs of dragons, not as foes, but as beings of awe. They whispered of the worm of Lambton, who grew vast and terrible from a curse born of carelessness, of the Laidley worm, a princess transformed, waiting to be freed by her brother's kiss, of the red dragon of Wales, locked in endless battle with the white dragon of the Saxons, their struggle symbolizing the fate of nations. Each tale added a new shade to the dragon's scales, from villain to victim, from terror to teacher. By the time the Renaissance dawned, when art and learning reawakened the world, the dragon began to change again, no longer just the monster of sermons. It became the riddle of scholars and explorers, a question of nature, myth, and memory. The New Age hungered for discovery, and with discovery came maps, vast gilded parchments that charted the edges of the world. And at those edges, where knowledge faded into mystery, the cartographers wrote the words that would echo through centuries. Hic sunt dracones, here be dragons. They meant it as a warning, but also as an invitation, because to draw a dragon on a map was to admit that there were still wonders left unclaimed to the Renaissance mind. The dragon was no longer an enemy of God, but a cipher of the unknown, a symbol of the vast, uncharted mystery that surrounded human existence. Painters and sculptors began to reimagine it, its scales gleaming with celestial geometry, its wings patterned like the heavens themselves. Alchemists, too, found new meaning in its form. To them, the dragon represented the prima materia, the raw, chaotic substance from which all things are born. In the dragon's fiery breath, they saw the symbol of transformation. In its coiled body, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The Ouroboros, the dragon devouring its own tail, became one of the most powerful emblems of the Renaissance spirit, the eternal circle of creation within the dragon. They wrote, "Lies both poison and cure." It was a truth the scholars of that time held close, that knowledge. Like fire, could burn or illuminate, depending on how one used it. And so, the dragon became the silent companion of thinkers and artists. Leonardo sketched its form beside machines and angels. Philosophers debated its meaning in candlelit chambers, seeing in it the reflection of the human condition, the struggle to master one's inner fire without being consumed by it. Even the church softened its stance. Some theologians began to see in the dragon not Satan's shape, but the image of fallen power, a force that could be redeemed, a soul that could rise. In that dawning light, the dragon's story evolved once again. It became not the end of the world, but its beginning. The Renaissance dragon was a paradox made beautiful, a creature of shadow painted in gold, a memory of fear transformed into a symbol of curiosity. For as humankind reached toward the stars and beyond, the dragon remained behind the veil, smiling from the edges of the map, whispering, "There is more yet to see." Even now, if you look closely at those old globes and atlases, the ones with faded ink and curling parchment, you can trace the outline of a dragon's back coiled across the unknown. Seized. It is a promise left by those who came before, that wonder lives where fear once ruled, that beyond the familiar lines of our world, something vast still waits, not to be slain, but to be understood. And perhaps that is the truest gift the dragons of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance left us, the reminder that mystery is not our enemy. It is our inheritance. So let the ink run and the candles burn low. Let the wind turn the pages of old books. For somewhere in those words and shadows, the dragon still breathes, made not of flame, but of thought, waiting for us to look beyond fear and see the fire for what it truly is, the light that leads us home in the lands where morning first touches the earth, where mountains rise like the spines of sleeping titans, and rivers move with the patience of time itself. The dragon did not vanish into myth. It endured, while the dragons of the West were cast as monsters and shadows. The dragons of the East became teachers, rulers, and symbols of life's eternal rhythm. They were not slain by heroes. They were honored by emperors, and in their image, whole civilizations found meaning in the vast story of the East. Dragons do not burn villages or guard treasures of gold. They guard something far more precious, the balance between heaven and earth. The story begins in ancient China, where dragons were older than the dynasties, older than the written word, as old as the rain itself, to the people of the Yellow River. The dragon was not a fantasy, it was nature personified. It lived in the rolling clouds, in the winding rivers that carved the valleys, in the lightning that split the mountains. The dragon's form, long, coiling, graceful, mirrored the shape of the river, the arteries of the land that brought life and harvest. To understand the dragon was to understand the harmony of the world. There is an old belief that the Chinese people themselves are descendants of the dragon, not in flesh, but in spirit, resilient, fluid, ever-changing, ever-enduring. The dragon became their ancestor, their ideal, their mirror. And so, the image of the dragon rose to the highest throne. From the Han to the Ming, every emperor called himself the son of the dragon. His throne, the dragon throne, his robe embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, symbols of heavenly authority when he spoke. His words were said to echo like the dragon's roar, a sound that united heaven, earth, and man, in palaces of jade and gold. In temples beside rivers and mountains, the dragon coiled across walls and gates. Its gaze was fierce yet calm, its claws open, not in attack, but in command. Each brushstroke, each carving, was a prayer, a request for harmony, for rain, for the world to move in balance. And yet, even here, the dragon was not a creature of the sky alone. It ruled the waters. In the deep sea stood the dragon kings, each governing one of the 4 seas, north, south, east, and west. Their palaces glittered beneath the waves, filled with pearls, coral, and the echoes of drowned songs. They controlled the tides, the storms, and the rivers that fed the land. When a drought struck, the people prayed not to gods of fire, but to the dragons below. Priests and peasants alike burned incense by lakes and streams, hoping to stir the sleeping kings from their deep blue dreams. Sometimes the dragons would listen, the skies would open, and the rain would fall, like scales shedding from the heavens. It is said that every raindrop carries a dragon's blessing, a whisper of their endless patience. But the dragon's spirit did not stop at the Great Wall. It crossed seas and mountains, finding new shapes and meanings in the hearts of neighboring lands. In Korea, the dragon became a guardian of purity and virtue. There, it was called Yang, a symbol of good fortune, of authority, and of benevolent rule. Unlike its Chinese kin, the Korean dragon often had no wings. It did not need them. Its power came from within, from the divine breath that carried it between heaven and sea. Korean legends tell of Imugi, great serpent, that dreams of becoming a true dragon. For centuries, it slumbers beneath waterfalls or deep lakes, absorbing wisdom and energy from the world. When its spirit is pure and its heart untainted, it rises to the heavens in a storm of light, transforming into a full dragon at last. It is a story of transformation, of patience and inner perfection. For the Koreans, the dragon's journey mirrors that of the human soul, a long, winding path toward harmony and enlightenment. They carved its image on palace eaves, painted it upon royal ceilings, and placed it beside the phoenix, the eternal partners of balance. Yin and yang, where the phoenix rose from fire, the dragon rose from water. Together, they represented life in perfect rhythm, motion, and stillness, change and constancy. In Japan, the dragon took on yet another form, quieter, deeper, as if shaped by the soul of the islands themselves. Here, it was called Ryer, a spirit of rivers, oceans, and rain, while the Western dragon ruled with flame, and the Chinese dragon with thunder. The Japanese dragon ruled with silence. It dwelled in sacred lakes and mountain springs, in the mists that curled over bamboo forests at dawn. To see one was a blessing, a glimpse into the divine order of things. The stories of Japan's dragons are as tranquil as they are profound. There is the tale of Watatsumi, the sea god, whose palace of coral and crystal lay beneath the waves. Fishermen who strayed too far sometimes found themselves there, brought before the Dragon King, offered pearls of wisdom before being returned to the surface, changed forever. And there is the story of Rirgen, the dragon god who controlled the tides. He possessed a magical jewel, one that could command the sea's rise and fall. It was said that even the moon obeyed his rhythm, and that when he withdrew to the depths, the tide receded in mourning. In the quiet rituals of Shinto shrines, dragons are still honored today. Wooden carvings guard the temple gates, their faces fierce but serene, their eyes fixed upon eternity. Monks chant prayers of gratitude to them, not to beg for power, but to thank them for the unseen harmony that sustains life. For in Japan, as in much of the East, the dragon is not a conqueror, but a caretaker, a reminder that true strength lies in gentleness, and that wisdom flows not from domination, but from balance. When the storms move across the Pacific, when the rivers swell after summer rains, some say you can still hear the old dragons breathe. Their voices are not roars, but low, distant murmurs, the sound of the world remembering its rhythm. They have never truly gone. They simply became part of the natural pulse of existence. To this day, during the Lunar New Year, when red lanterns glow like embers in the night and drums beat like the heart of the earth, the dragons return, woven from silk and firelight, dancing through the streets in celebration of renewal. Those dances are not mere performance. They are invocation. They call upon the spirits of rain, growth, and good fortune, awakening the memory of the ancient bond between humankind and the elements that cradle it. And perhaps that is the secret. The East never forgot that dragons were never separate from us. They were the voices of wind and water, the guardians of balance, the dream of a world in harmony. If you close your eyes, you can still feel them in the rhythm of the rain, in the curl of mist around the mountains, in the quiet strength that flows through all living things. They are the world's first memory, and its eternal breath. The world had grown wider. The maps were no longer blank, and yet they still whispered of the unknown. Where the parchment ended and the oceans began, men felt the pull of wonder. The stars had become their compass, and the wind their constant companion. But beneath the creak of masts and the hiss of waves, there was something else, an older song, one that sailors swore they could hear when the night was calm and the sea breathed slow, the song of dragons. For in that restless century, when exploration and empire stretched across the horizon, when men began to circle the globe and name its edges, the dragon still haunted the imagination of the brave. It no longer lurked in the corners of medieval maps. It lived in the depths of the sea, in the volcanoes that spat smoke into heaven, in the thunder that chased ships across distant skies, and the explorers, those who could not rest beneath any one sky, went searching for it. The age of discovery was an age of faith and doubt, of courage and contradiction. The world had grown vast, but the heart of humankind still longed for mystery. When Columbus sailed west across the endless Atlantic, he wrote in his journal that the sea itself seemed alive, filled with strange creatures unseen by man. In the waves that glowed with starlight, he saw dragons of light, and though he did not name them as such, the old myths breathed in his words. As ships crossed into the Indian Ocean, the sailors heard stories from Arab traders of monstrous serpents that slept beneath coral reefs, rising only when the moon was full. They were called Makara, half crocodile, half fish, guardians of the deep. Portuguese explorers told of flying serpents in the African skies, their wings thin as parchment, their cries like the wind. They returned home with tales of scales, of bones, and sometimes with the bones themselves, fossils, strange and ancient, dug from the red earth. The scholars of Europe stared at these relics in awe. Massive jaws, clawed limbs, spines that curved like waves frozen in stone. They called them dragon bones, and for a time that was truth enough in England. During the reign of Elizabeth, rumors spread of sea serpents seen off the coast of Norway, creatures so vast they were mistaken for islands. Men swore they saw their coils rise through the mist, their eyes glowing like coals. In 1569, a priest named Alois Magnus published his Carta Marina, a great map of the northern seas. On it he drew dragons, whales, and leviathans curling through the icy waters. He wrote, "These monsters dwell in the deep, and to approach them is peril, for they strike ships with their tails and devour men whole." But beneath the fear, there was fascination. Magnus was no superstitious man. He was a scholar, a chronicler of the unknown. He did not draw dragons merely as warnings, but as placeholders for mystery itself. And in that act, he joined a long lineage of dreamers who believed that what we fear most might yet be. Wondrous as the 1600s dawned, Europe's curiosity turned toward science. Natural philosophers, those early seekers of truth, began to search for evidence, bones, fossils, the proof that dragons had once walked the earth. In China, they had long used what they called dragon bones in medicine, fossilized remains, ground into powder to strengthen the body and calm the spirit. When Jesuit missionaries arrived, they carried these relics back to Europe, and scholars examined them with trembling hands. They found creatures beyond imagination, skulls of beasts, with horns and teeth unlike any living thing. To them, it could only be one thing, proof of the dragon. But as time unfolded, a new truth began to flicker at the edges of knowledge. A young world of fossils and forgotten ages began to rise from the earth, and with it, the idea of prehistoric giants, dinosaurs, creatures that once ruled the land, long before humankind drew breath. And so the dragon, once myth, began to find its echo in reality. Yet even as science lifted its lantern into the dark, the sailors and storytellers still held fast to wonder. The Pacific explorers, Magellan, Cook, Tasman heard from islanders tales of sea spirits shaped like serpents, their scales shining like moonlit waves. In the waters of Indonesia, they encountered real dragons, the Komodo, massive and ancient, its tongue flickering like fire. For a brief moment, myth and truth intertwined. Men wrote in their journals that they had found the last living dragon. They described its stride, its hiss, its unblinking gaze, and in their awe, they gave it a name of reverence and fear. The Dragon of Komodo. It was not the fire-breathing beast of legend, but it was real, and in its eyes burned something older than memory. Still, the dream of dragons refused to die, even as the Enlightenment cast its glow across the world. Painters still imagined them coiling through clouds. Writers still whispered their names. The dragon had simply changed its home. It no longer lived on the maps. It lived in the imagination. When explorers reached the peaks of the Himalayas, they found fossils of serpentine shapes and called them the bones of NGAs, divine dragons of the underworld. When sailors crossed the South Seas, they saw whirlpools form like the coils of a sleeping beast, and though they knew the science, their hearts still whispered the old word, dragon. It was not deception. It was reverence, a quiet acknowledgement that the world, no matter how much we charted it, would always keep some secrets for itself. By the dawn of the 18th century, the dragons had retreated from the world of ships and scholars, but not from our dreams. They lingered in art, in story, in the language of awe, and in the hush between thunder and wind. You could still hear them, that low, rumbling breath of possibility. The age of discovery had not slain the dragons. It had only proven what the old myths already knew, that to seek knowledge is to chase the dragon, to follow the shimmer of the unknown and find, at its heart, something that changes you for what is exploration, if not the courage to sail past the edges of the map, into the realms where mystery still lives. And what is the dragon, if not the embodiment of that mystery itself? The part of the world that refuses to be conquered and asks only to be wondered at. So, as the waves rise and fall, and the stars guide the lost home again, the dragon still moves beneath the surface, ancient and unhurried, waiting for the next dreamer, brave enough to follow it into the dark. The world grew louder. The sails gave way to steam, and the whisper of quills was replaced by the hum of machines. Cities rose where forests once dreamed, and the smoke of progress curled into the sky like the breath of slumbering giants. And yet, in that new age of light and iron, the old shadows remained. For the dragon, though forgotten by the scholars and the sailors, had not died. It had only gone inward. It slipped from the pages of atlases and natural journals and took shelter instead in the human mind, in dreams, in stories, in the quiet corners of imagination where wonder still dared to flicker against the rising glare of reason. The industrial age was an age of noise and conquest. Steamships crossed oceans, railways split mountains, and the human heart, intoxicated by discovery, believed itself the master of all things. But mastery comes with a cost, and as men built engines that roared louder than storms, something ancient stirred in their art, a reminder of what cannot be tamed in the dim glow of gas lamps. Writers began to dream again of dragons, not as beasts of the wilderness, but as symbols of power unmeasured, of forces beyond human control. Mary Shelley gave the world Frankenstein, a creature born not of nature, but of mankind's own ambition, and in its heart, the echo of the dragon's fire, the dangerous hunger for creation. Then came the poets and the visionaries, William Blake, painting serpents of light and flame, Coleridge, writing of ancient mariners, cursed by their own pride. Each one, knowingly or not, was breathing life back into the dragon. In the quiet century that followed, the dragon was reborn in a new form, the fantasy of modern imagination, no longer chained to scripture or superstition. It rose free, a creature of wonder once more. Writers began to weave its name into myth anew. In the 19th century, as explorers charted the last unmarked places on Earth, dreamers charted the unmarked places of the soul. George MacDonald, the gentle father of fantasy, wrote of dragons that tested courage and faith. Andrew Lang gathered old tales and gave them new breath, preserving their wisdom for a changing world. And then, the 20th century came, a century that would teach humanity the power of imagination in the face of destruction. From the ashes of war, the dragon returned once more, not as a monster, but as a mirror. It was J.R.R. Tolkien, the quiet scholar of Oxford, who gave the dragon a new voice. In The Hobbit, his Smaug was ancient, intelligent, burning with greed and cunning. Yet beneath the gold and the smoke, he was a reminder of something timeless, that even in a world of men and machines, the mythic still matters. Tolkien understood what his age had forgotten, that dragons are not only enemies of knights, but symbols of what dwells within us all, the power we fear, the desire we worship, the shadow that gives shape to our light. And from Tolkien's fire, others took flame. C.S. Lewis wrote of Eustace, a boy turned into a dragon by his own selfishness, and redeemed only through humility and grace. In that tale, the dragon's curse became a kind of salvation. Through the shedding of scales came awakening. Through pain, rebirth. The dragon was no longer just the beast to slay. It was the part of us that longed to be healed. As the modern age turned its gaze toward stars and machines, the dragon found new forms again in the worlds of film and art. It flew higher than ever before, in the shimmering skies of animation, in the firelit halls of fantasy epics, in the hearts of children and dreamers. It became the guardian once more, the friend, the teacher, the symbol of freedom in the East. Filmmakers drew upon the ancient wisdom of R'yr, the dragon of the waters. In Spirited Away, the gentle river spirit Haku reminds us that even when the modern world forgets the sacred still remembers us. In the West, dragons soared across silver screens, from the fierce elegance of Dragon's Lair to the wisdom of how to train your dragon, to the stormy skies of Game of Thrones. Each new dragon, whether kind or cruel, was a reflection of its time, the creature we needed to see. In an age of fear, the dragon became a comfort. In an age of ambition, a warning. In an age of wonder, a companion. And so it continues, as it always has, changing shape, but never ceasing to exist. There is a quiet truth at the heart of all these stories. The dragon never leaves us, because it is us. It is the embodiment of mystery, the flame of curiosity that refuses to die. When we write, when we dream, when we seek to understand what lies beyond the visible, we are chasing the dragon, not as slayers, but as pilgrims. For every age that thinks it has outgrown the dragon will one day remember that it cannot live without it. It lives in our symbols and our science, in the twisting double helix of life itself, in the fire of the stars that birthed us. The dragon is the pattern that repeats the endless, coiling beauty of creation. When we dream of dragons, we are dreaming of ourselves, of the endless balance between fear and wonder, chaos and creation, death and rebirth. Now the world stands beneath the same stars that watched over the first storytellers. We have mapped the heavens, split the atom, walked on the moon, and still, somewhere deep within us, the dragon sleeps, its breath steady and eternal. It does not ask to be believed, only to be remembered. Because as long as there are hearts that yearn for mystery, as long as there are fires lit in the dark, as long as there are stories whispered before sleep, the dragon will rise again, not from mountain or sea, but from the soul of the dreamer who dares to listen. And if you listen now, beyond the hum of the world, beyond the turning of the night, you might still hear it, a low rumble, a soft breath, the heart of the dragon, beating in time with your own. The night has grown deep now. The candles are low, their flames trembling like the last breaths of the stars. And somewhere beyond your window, the wind is whispering through the dark, a soft, endless song that sounds almost like memory. We have traveled far, you and I, through time and legend, through smoke and ink, through the whispers of monks and the dreams of emperors. We have walked through the deserts of myth, sailed across the edge of the world, and touched the scales of stories older than history itself. And now, as the tale draws near its quiet end, we come to the question that lingers still, the one that humankind has asked for 1,000 ages. Why do dragons endure? Why, when gods fade and empires crumble, when languages change and continents shift, does the dragon remain? Its breath still warm in our stories, its shadow still soft across our dreams. Perhaps it is because the dragon was never just a creature. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything we fear and everything we hope to become. When the ancients looked at the storm, they saw its power and its beauty. They felt small, but also connected. They imagined that somewhere within that wildness lived a being who understood the balance between creation and destruction, life and death, fire and calm. That being was the dragon dot to the east. It was harmony, the gentle rhythm of rain and wind. To the west, it was challenge, the test of courage, the shadow of the soul. To the north, it was endurance. To the south, transformation. Each culture shaped it differently, yet the essence was always the same. The dragon was life itself, vast, untamed and eternal. It curled around mountains, it swam through oceans, it slumbered beneath volcanoes and roots. Wherever the earth breathed, there, too, was the dragon. But over centuries, as we learned to name the stars and measure the seasons, the dragon changed its home. It moved inward from the world around us to the world within. It became the keeper of dreams, the spark of imagination that wakes when we close our eyes. Every artist who paints the impossible, every poet who dares to speak beauty into the unknown, every scientist who stares into the dark and asks why, they are chasing the dragon, not to slay it, but to touch it, to glimpse the fire that flickers just beyond understanding. There is a story told among old storytellers that dragons never die. When one falls, its body becomes the land, mountains from its spine, rivers from its blood, clouds from its breath. And when the wind moves across the fields, the people say it is the dragon turning in its sleep. That story is more than myth. It is remembrance. It is how we explain what cannot be lost, the idea that the world itself is alive, and that our stories are the way it speaks. The dragon is the language of awe. It is how we remember to wonder. In our modern world, we move faster than the stars can blink. We chase light, we build fire, we fill the silence with sound. But somewhere beneath it all, in the quiet places of the heart, the dragon still dreams. It dreams of the first dawn, when the world was new and unspoken. It dreams of the seas and the storms, of monks bending over parchment, of emperors beneath golden roofs, of sailors tracing dragons on their maps. And it dreams of you, a listener, in the stillness, your breath steady, your eyes heavy with the weight of peace. You have carried the dragon's story tonight, through time and silence. You have walked with it through through the ruins and the heavens, through the fires of myth and the calm of imagination. And now it rests within you, for the dragon was never truly out there. It has always lived in here, in the rhythm of your pulse, in the breath you take before sleep, in the spark of curiosity that flickers when you dream. It is the whisper that says, there is more to see. It is the courage that rises when fear would hold you still. It is the fire that does not burn, but warms. So, if you ever find yourself lost in darkness, remember, the dragon is not gone. It is waiting in the quiet, in the depth of your own heart, ready to breathe once more. Close your eyes. Listen to the world exhale. That sound, that deep, ancient rumble beneath all things, that is the dragon dreaming. It dreams of oceans and stars, of creation and endings, of every life and every story yet to come. And as you drift toward sleep, know that you are part of that dream. For as long as the world turns, as long as stories are told, the dragon will live on, not as flame, but as light, not as terror, but as truth, not as monster, but as memory, the eternal fire that never dies. Sleep well now, traveler of legends. The journey is done, but the dream continues. The dragons are still watching, still waiting, their hearts beating softly in the dark. And somewhere beyond the stars and the turning earth, they smile, because tonight you remembered them, and that is enough. Hello again, my night wanderer. You've made it to the end of another long road, through smoke, through story, through time itself. The dragons have settled now. Their wings are folded. Their eyes are half closed beneath the quiet sky. And somewhere, in that soft hush between waking and sleep, you are resting beside them, a traveler who has crossed the world in whispers and wonder. Thank you for walking with me tonight, for listening with your heart open, for letting the world slow down just enough to let the old magic breathe again. May your dreams be gentle, your night deep and still, and your morning bright with a calm kind of light. Remember, there is always a bit of fire in you, the kind that warms, not burns, the kind that belongs to dragons and dreamers, and to those who still believe that stories can heal. So rest easy now. The world can wait. The dragons will keep watch until you wake. Good night, my friend. Sleep well, and may your dreams be full of wonder.